This week, it's my great pleasure to bring you Rachel O'Leary. She is kind of new to the scene. She hasn't been making videos for a really long time, but quite a few years at this point. Her channel's been real successful. She's my go-to girl for anything that I need to know about small fish, the nano fish and tiny fish. She's an expert in them and many, many other areas of the hobby. Pre-COVID, she was doing many, many events all over the place. It's always a pleasure to run into her and to learn new things from her. And I can't wait. If you've never met her before, I can't wait to introduce you. Here's Rachel. So I talked to Joey last night for about, I want to say 5 hours. I mean, he really likes to talk. I think he gets lonely in Canada.
It's funny. He must have just finished up with you when he sent me a video message saying he was missing me.
We talked about you a little bit.
Aww.
All good stuff.
I love Joey. I miss him very much. We were supposed to hang out in September. We were supposed to do some store tours. He was supposed to come to the house. We were going to do some projects. We had a lot of plans, but...
We all did, right?
Yeah. I mean, everything, my entire life was canceled for this year. Most of what I've been doing has been traveling, and it's just all gone. So
that sort of leads into one of the questions I have for you. And I think we all went through a real struggle this year in 2020. What's something positive in your life that COVID made you slow down enough to realize?
Oh, I have so many things I'm thankful for this year. I think first and foremost, it really gave me the opportunity to spend time in my own local waterways, exploring really the beauty and minutia that the different seasons have to offer here. I've spent nothing but time both kayaking, canoeing, and hiking, and really just seeing the diversity of species, the evolution of all the different plants, and really just reconnecting with my home area it's been really phenomenal and very inspiring. It's one of the reasons I recently got a stink pot turtle. They're native to this area. And it's one of the reasons I got them is because I had so much fun doing turtle spottings this summer during COVID. I like to thank goodness for small favors. I'm happy that luckily my entire family is healthy. I've gotten to spend a lot of time paying more attention to details and slowing down and enjoying things. And, really spending time in my local waterways has been amazing.
You've been spending a lot of time in nature this summer, which is, apparent from your Instagram posts and your Facebook posts and stuff. A lot of beautiful natural pictures. How important do you think it is to reconnect with nature from time to time, especially as a person who mimics biotopes in their home aquarium?
I really just think it can give you unparalleled information, even just simple things like walking next to a creek and seeing how the rocks jumble or the wood connects to the rock or how the plants grow or the color of the water, the color of the substrate, what the substrate looks like, what fish are doing in reaction to that substrate can give you so much meaningful information when we're trying to duplicate these microcosms of society for our fish. I think it's really invaluable. And of course, waterways are a vast and amazing thing. So your mileage will vary, but at least here in Pennsylvania, and I know down where you are in Tennessee, there's a lot of streams, there's a lot of smaller rivers. There's a lot of opportunity to learn a whole lot about how everything is connected and what that means for keeping, feeding, and breeding our fish.
Are you shipping fish again, or have you?
I am, but I haven't imported now in almost 2 years, so everything I have available is just the things that I'm selling selling obviously, breeding here, which that's still like 25 or 30 species, maybe. I'm not sure. But I'm trying to keep it very, very, very low key. I prefer to ship 1 day a week. I prefer to not be running to FedEx. I prefer not to be going out for shipping supplies or having them delivered. I'm trying to sort of minimize my personal spread
Right.
as much as possible. So I've been shipping on Mondays. Now we're into the holiday season, so probably not again until after the holidays. But yeah, and I'm probably going to be selling off some of my personal fish. Just to streamline things or to provide the opportunity to maybe get some new species for more species spotlights or things like that.
You've talked a bit in the past few months about scaling back. And
Yeah.
do you have any idea what that's going to look like for you? Or it's going to be like, I noticed you've got a paludarium. It took a while, but it's still going. You got your paludarium going, and you got your your stink pot turtle and stuff. Is it going to change, like less fish tanks and more like other kinds of things, or?
I think that my level of scaling back is still most people's like dream amount of aquariums or whatever. Every time I think that I'm scaling back, I'm like, ooh, but I should try this, or ooh, I want to set up that. And I'm really fortunate in that, I have quite the stash of hardscaping materials. I live in a really beautiful area. I have the opportunity to collect or get a lot of things. So originally I thought I was going to take down most of the main wall of my fish room and keep my breeding racks for my breeding projects, keep my hill stream, keep my paludarium, and keep my 75-gallon South American nano community. And then I got the turtle. And then I was looking at the other fish in the other aquariums on the main wall. And then I looked at like the actual physical effort to break it down. I'm like, maybe it's easier to just keep them all going for now. So we'll see. I am so full of interest for this hobby still. It's really difficult for me to scare back. The hope was that if I got the quantity of tanks that I am maintaining to a manageable level, then it would mean I could have someone come in here to maintain them should I get to travel. Because what I would really like to do, once it's safe to do so, of course, is to be able to travel extensively to go and look at the fish that I love and work with in their native habitats, get a lot of really great underwater footage, really see what it's like there, not just in the water, but around the waterways, in order to better facilitate my abilities as a fish keeper, but also the things about conservation that I think are so important. You can't travel for a lot if you have as many aquariums as I do. It's not fair to the aquariums. The fish will survive, but I want them to thrive. So I have a lot of figuring out to do. I mean, COVID buys me some time because clearly no one's doing a lot of international or even national travel right now.
Yeah.
But that is one of the goals for the future. And the main reason I was thinking about trying to scale back more is that I really want to sort of grow my education effort to be able to show more of what I talk about that I've seen that I haven't been able to show video footage of before.
Yeah, you breed a lot of fish, and that requires a particular amount of attention.
It
A
does.
lot more so than just keeping a community tank.
Right. And, my kids are, willing facilitators of their mother's crazy hobbies, but one of them is going to college and the other one will be going to college soon. And the cats are not very good at feeding aquariums. So I have to be realistic here.
Your girls did a pretty good job this summer while you were running around.
They did a great job. And I wasn't gone that long for most of those trips. The one trip to Montana, I was gone for a few weeks. But they did an amazing job taking care of everything then.
I've always been impressed how much of a family affair it is when you go to a convention or a trip. They would come along and they'd always help, and how helpful and interested they seem to be. My daughter's pretty helpful and interested too, but not quite to that scale.
Well, I think Kerrigan, though, has kept more tanks than my kids have on her own. She set up more tanks. I think my kids just really enjoy learning and meeting people. So the travel element, of course, is always fun. Now, the nuts and bolts of actually maintaining aquariums, not so fun. Not as fun as that element anyway.
Sure, the work part's never fun.
Right.
Holly really, really enjoys our aquariums all over the house. But if I said, hey, would you help me out with a water change? I think she'd be like, no, they can die.
Oh, I am sure.
But not that bad. Not that bad, but you know what I mean. She likes them okay. So you deal a lot with fish retailers overseas, or you have in the past. Are you a trans shipper? Is that the right word?
I had an import license, so I could directly import into a port of entry, and I also utilize transshippers. And what transshippers are is they basically provide a series of lists of fish available from various countries. They handle the paperwork through Fish and Game. You place your order, you commit to a certain amount of fish, and then they bring it to essentially a warehouse. You show up and you pick up your fish and take them home. It's very different than like a wholesaler. Most wholesalers get them in, you can buy in small quantities. Most often with transshippers, you're buying in bulk. You're basically paying a slight increase in the per piece cost in order for someone else to deal with the paperwork and the legwork, which for me was really useful. I utilized transshippers really heavily living. I guess I have two ports of entry close to me, one of which is Baltimore and the other is New York City or New Jersey. Both of those are ports of entry. Either one of them to New York, it was 3.5 hours each way to pick up fish. To Baltimore, about an hour and a half, but I preferred working with the Fish and Game people in New Jersey, New York, so generally went there. So it's, for me, having a transshipper that could deal with, like, if a flight was late, they didn't just drive 3.5 hours to pick up fish and then had to sit in their car in a parking lot. They could just go back to their building and then come back. So I have done some transshipping. It's not something I enjoy doing. There's a lot of stress. It's a lot of volume. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of legwork. I much preferred either just doing a direct shipment or utilizing the tools that transshippers have to offer.
How do you connect with people across the pond for, fish that you might want or something like that? I mean, I know you dealt in volume, so there was...
Yeah. I mean, for small volume, I don't really know because I've never bought in small volume. I've only ever done it the way I've done it, which is not the most practical, economical, or easy way to do anything. In fact, it's quite the opposite of that. I just sort of leapt in and went for it. But a lot of that was because when I started doing this, people weren't getting in little fish, and the only way to get them was to be the one to get them. Now it's very different. The hobby has grown in leaps and bounds in those interests, and so many people are working with them and interested in them, and that niche of the hobby is huge. So it's much easier. I'm sure it's very different now. I'm actually going through a weird conundrum now where I don't know where to buy my fish because I was the one that sold fish for so long. I don't know where to get new fish.
Oh yeah. And without clubs meeting regularly, it's...
Exactly. I have no idea where to get fish now. I need some fish. I mean, obviously I have a lot of fish, but there's, I need some stuff to fill out some tanks, and I have no idea where to buy fish.
Wow. And it's not like you're going to go order 1,000 of them at a time.
Well, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to. So I'm kind of in a...
You're in a tight spot.
Yeah, it's weird. And I don't know how to ask with my social media reach. I don't know how to ask where people are buying fish without it seeming like I'm going to be doing some sort of expose or something.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how to find out like where the good places to buy fish are. It's such a weird, mind trap to realize that I'm in.
Isn't it? It's a strange new world once you cross over into an influencer kind of persona online. where
Yeah, I
I've
still don't think of myself that way.
well, I know, but uh, I think that you and I both like. So I used to be like, I should curse more. I should be more adult. That's the way I talk in real life. I'm being ungenuine. And then I started getting emails from little kids asking me questions and saying how much they like the channel. And even a few, this one mother wrote me and said that her autistic son has memorized a bunch of my videos and he just recites some and stuff. And I was like, okay, well,
Well,
maybe I won't curse.
I'm told that some of my like species spotlights and some of the sciencey or more sciencey stuff has been used for like homeschool curriculum. And that's always sort of stuck with me is that, I see a lot of comments where people are like, hey, I watch this with my kids. Hey, whatever, we use this for, we play this in our store, and I've always really kept that in the back of my mind. And I think that's part of the reason, I let some personal stuff slip in,
Well, sure.
but for the most part, I keep a lot of that out of it. And I think it's mainly because, I'm not like a vlogger. I like to think of myself as an educator.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try and keep my content pretty on that level, which isn't necessarily rewarded by YouTube.
Right.
But, I know that no one has to worry about my videos playing anywhere. There's nothing that's going to show up that's, problematic at any rate.
I think, what's funny is I can think of probably 10,000 times when I'll be mid-sentence and I'm already hearing I'm already reading comments that haven't happened yet. I'm like, oh, I can't say that. Or I just don't want to go there, I'll just let it go. So, yeah, it really is kind of a weird world that we're in. So your Hillstream aquarium, how many species do you have inside of there? Have you lost count?
I don't know.
I was watching your video today and I was trying to figure out one of the more recent ones, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's got to be 50 different types of fish in there.
I don't think there's that many, but that is the very first aquarium I built on my channel. And It was my dream aquarium for like a decade, but I had never been able to save up the money to get the aquarium. I was so focused on growing my business, I hadn't been able to get the tank. And then a friend of mine broke down their fish room and was like, hey, can you help me sell my tanks? If you can sell all this stuff, I'll give you this $150 for free and you can keep it. And, that's like my finder's fee for you, getting people to take this other stuff off my hands. And that's how I ended up with the Hillstream aquarium. And it was just sort of fortuitous that it grew on YouTube and I got it right when I started that. But I stocked it so slowly. I would literally have to look back through the footage to see how many species I've put in it. And I know a few didn't have a ton of longevity. Like I put in some Aramyazon, which are a little tiny, tiny Hillstream goby, but they're essentially annuals. And it's been 5 years now and I haven't seen them for a year and a half. So those I know are no longer in there. But there are probably a dozen or so loach species, a few shrimp species, 3 species of shiner, 2 species of Rhinogobius, Syciopius, some Stiphodons, some Danios, the white clouds. I mean, it's a pretty diverse little tank. And I think for the most part, other than those Aramyazons, everything that I've put in there is still in there. Oh, there's Borneo suckers, there's Sowelia. I mean, it's a really fun tank. And I think my favorite part about that tank is that I can just sit and watch, and no matter where you look in that aquarium, you see a completely different kind of behavior, not only because of how it's designed, but because of the diversity of the species that are stocked within it, because it's such a big tank and the fish are so small, it really draws you in. And it's the most rewarding tank I've ever built in my whole life. It's really fun.
Now, I know a certain percentage of your tanks are kind of a little showier than others. You've got some that are more utility oriented tanks, for like quarantine and maybe some breeding projects and stuff like that. But for your show tanks or your tanks that you want to look pretty, especially, is there? Do you have one particular problem that plagues, like a type of algae or a pest? Or what do you have any particular problem that is always an issue for you?
I do, and it's all my fault. I get hair algae like I'm being paid to farm it. And I know it is a nutrient imbalance. I use LED lighting on all of my aquariums, and it's pretty strong lighting. And I use nutrient-rich substrates in many of my aquariums. Not all of them. Some of them use pool filter sand. Some of them use like inert gravel, but a lot of them use like a high-quality soil. And I grow relatively slow growing plants. And because of that nutrient imbalance and the relative richness of the soil and the light, I am really prone to hair algae. Luckily, it's pretty easy to manually remove. If you have like a bottle brush, you can just twirl it through the hair algae and remove it. The other thing that I get is a small amount of green spot algae on the glass. But for the most part, I'm pretty fortunate, and I think part of that reason is I think that my actual well water has a high CO2 content, which helps contribute to the plant growth in combination with the decent lighting and decent substrate that I use. Certainly, I know there's no cookie cutter formula for having success, and there's really no reason I have as much success as I do with a lot of the plants that I grow. I'm just pretty lucky.
I seem to get a wide variety of hair algae. Like I've got 2 tanks that are a big problem for me right now. One's got like the coarse, I call them Hulk pubes.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Those
My
coarse,
Escaping from Scraps one has the algae pubes.
yeah,
Where
me
it's
too.
wiry.
And I've got another one. Have you seen the other one where it's kind of slimy and you can't pull it off of the plants?
That's Spirogyra. It's super slippery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spirogyro? Is this gyra?
Spirogyra, I think, is the type of algae.
Wow.
That slippery one.
That sounds like a cool drink you'd get on a beach vacation.
Maybe we should create it for the next time we have a convention. And
Spirogyra and Sprite. Yeah.
Spirogyra!
So, yeah, I haven't found an effective way to really remove it. And I've been exploring like every possible technique to really avoid it. And it seems like you just kind of manually remove it until the tank balances out and then it stops. And that's like all that's ever happened.
I mean, a lot of it is patience. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do to like put out the fire. Like if you drop your water level really low and spritz it with some peroxide carefully, that'll knock it out until it grows back. You know, you can try lifting your lights, you can try adjusting your fertilizers. But I really find noticing the balance and changing one thing at a time is the best way to address algae, no matter what kind it is. Because if you throw a lot of things at it at once, as you know, you are an experienced Planet Tank guy. If you change too many variables at once, you don't know what's working, and how do you maintain that?
Right.
So, you know, you've got to sort of like keep mental notes or use the Notepad app on your phone or keep a notebook, whatever it does, and be like, okay, December 10th, 2020, I raised the light 2 inches and reduced, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And just sort of pay attention to see what's working. But for the vast majority of things, I find that time generally does it.
Yeah.
Now, this is not for like high tech, high fert, like nutrient rich, fast growing, labor intensive planted setups, but for our like more lower tech or more average consumer level planted aquarium, patience is really the best thing you got.
Oh, that's kind of true for
leaves, you know, remove the algae, do your water changes, like change things slowly so you can, because you know, especially with slow growing plants, you can't expect to see results quickly. When the plants grow slowly, you have to sort of give time for things to reach an equilibrium.
I think what I observe from the questions that I receive and from the things that I've observed from other people, it seems like the patience thing is the breaking point. It's the
It is because it's so frustrating. You see this algae on your tank. You just spent all this money and time setting up an aquarium. You're expecting it to look like all these pictures you see on the internet of these beautiful, balanced, harmonious things where the fish fart music bubbles. And it just doesn't really work out that way. A lot of this hobby is patience and waiting for the payoff. And I think one of the greatest disservices a lot of creators, not all, mind you, but a lot of creators do, is that they don't show you the ugly parts. And there's a lot of ugly parts of any pet keeping. I don't care what it is. Your cat vomits on your new carpeting, whatever, your snake gets out of its enclosure, your fish tank is full of algae. I mean, this is the reality of the learning curve and of nature, really.
I was real nervous about it in the earlier years of YouTube. You don't want to show weakness or failure.
Right.
You don't want to say, well, here, I did this video about how to make an aquarium and look what happened to it. It looks like crap,
Yeah,
6 months later, but
then 6 months later, it looks bomb.
Yeah. Well, that's something I learned too, but it took a lot of time, is that they can go bad and then come back.
Right.
And then they can go bad again and come back again. Or you
Right.
get real lucky. My tanks that have been up for multiple years, no problem. No problem at all.
Most of my aquariums at this point in the fish room, I think I built that fish room. It showed up in my memories 11 years ago is when I put in the big boys tank where it is now. And I had been running my fish room for 5 years before that.
Wow.
So, certainly not in their current manifestation necessarily, but all of my aquariums have been cycled and running for so long. I just don't always have the same problems that newer fish keepers do, except for when I set up brand new tanks. So I try my best to show those learning caves, like my scaping for scraps one, man, it went to, it was pea soup and all of that super wiry filamentous algae, and the fish looked great, the plants were growing, but I couldn't see into the tank.
I'm looking over at mine right now, and it's the rocks in the middle are so covered with algae you can't see them anymore. Everything else looks fine. It's just the rocks. So that might be my video this weekend.
But the thing is you clean it up, take a video, 3 hours later, and it's going to look freaking great again for another 2 weeks until it looks like crap. And eventually over time, that time in between when you need to do those laborious sort of, putting out the fires gets further and further in between, and you just have a tank that you love that takes little maintenance.
I think it's a sign of a genuine person on YouTube if they show you how bad their tanks gets, and then they clean it up and show you how to fix it.
In my mind it does, because I'm like, ooh, you took that to that.
Yeah.
I can do that too.
See, it's not hopeless.
No.
And 1 in 5, I have no problems with at all. This tank behind me, I've had zero issues with. I keep waiting for it to just crash and burn, but it hasn't. And I even stocked it fast.
Gosh.
Well, these are all plants I already had, but they've started, especially the ones at the bottom, you can't really see it too well. But I've got the 4-leaf clover.
Yep.
I haven't been able to grow in any other tank. Like maybe a little bit, not very much. It's going nuts in here. I've never had that happen before, so I'm like, yes. But
well, and I really think that's the biggest thing with planted aquariums. As I mentioned earlier, there's not a cookie cutter answer because there's so many variables. There's your light intensity, there's the depth of your tank, there's your source water, there's your fish load, there's the plants that you start with. Are they established? Are they new? Your substrate. There's so many variables that there is not ever, I don't care what you say, there is not ever a cookie cutter way to have things go in a specific way in the evolution of a planted tank. there just isn't. There's, you can predict some issues, you can prevent some issues, you certainly can be prepared to deal with issues, but you really just have to watch it evolve and see what works, because with all the variables involved, it's just not a simple thing. And I think that's what I love about it personally, is the constant challenge and engagement. But it's certainly not for everybody.
Yeah, I don't think there's a real world scenario that can be mimicked over and over again. If you go into a lab, you can have perfectly filtered water, you can have measured amounts of substrate, you could do...
Exactly.
But with me, I'm like ripping the thing open with my teeth and kind of pouring it in across the top.
Well, and how an active substrate behaves in someone with a hard source water versus a neutral source water is completely different. So your mileage will vary very much based on that, even, so it's
or an inert hardscape even, or versus like I guess Serious stone, doesn't it react, has calcium in it that reacts and changes the water parameters too? And
exactly, and that also can be dependent upon your water volume, your water change schedule, so that's what I mean, that there's just so many variables. I really worry about some of the tutorials out there that say this is how you do this, because without fully explaining the variables and at least a little bit of the science behind it for people to have an understanding, maybe they're not interested in that. I know most people probably aren't, but for me, like, without going into it with my brain wrapped around the what ifs, you're not setting yourself up for success.
So when you go around town, do people know you as the fish lady? Like,
they know me as the fish.
Fish. Does that particular tattoo get a lot of questions?
It does, especially from doctors.
What do they wonder? What do they think's happening there?
Friends, and I'm ambidextrous, so I'll shake hands with either. So whichever one you reach out to, whenever I meet a lefty, they're like, pimp knuckles. Like, that's right. Pimp knuckles of the fish variety. Don't worry.
That's so funny. That is so funny. I think, one of the first times I met you, it wasn't the first time I met you, but it was the first time I was brave enough to talk to you, because the first time I met you, or I didn't really meet you, but I noticed you at it was a Louisville ACA convention.
ACA.
Yeah, you were in the auction with what did they call themselves? The babes, or the
babes in the fish hobby.
Yeah, you were there, like, hanging out, and I saw your
selling raffle tickets.
Yeah, I saw your mohawk and stuff. I was like, wow, she's really cool. And then the next time I saw you, I think Joey was talking about you.
He had just launched my channel.
Yeah, and
finally forced me. We actually met up at that convention for him to work on convincing me to start doing YouTube, and it took him probably about a year.
Yeah, you did not. You kind of went in unwillingly, right?
I was very resistant.
And this is something he talked about yesterday. He said what put you over the edge was the ability to talk to millions of people instead of maybe a few hundred here and there, and like really spread your message.
Well, what really got me was the reality, or the realization of the reality, is that not everybody is like at the same level of nerd. Not everybody goes to a fish club. Not everybody goes to fish conventions. For 10 years or so, I was going to fish conventions and fish clubs every weekend. And like, that is like the thing that kept me going through a lot of really hard things in my life. I involved my family. It's how I made a lot of my most important friends as an adult. But it never even entered my mind that there are so many fish keepers out there that either live in areas that don't have that available, or live lives where that's not possible, or live in a socioeconomic status that it's not possible. And YouTube is free. Mm-hmm. And I can share my joy and my educational message and my nerdery for free with as many people as want to find it. And that's really what got me hooked on doing YouTube was Joey taking the time to make me realize that there was a huge network of people that may enjoy my content or may benefit from my content that I was missing out on. And basically I felt like a snob, and I didn't want to be a snob. I wanted to be accessible, which I thought I was being. I was writing for magazine articles, I was writing books, I was lecturing, I was going to clubs, I was traveling. But that allows you to meet this much of the fish keeping population out of that much of the fish keeping population.
So he reached in and grabbed you out of the 70s.
He reached me in and like Homer Simpsoned me and was like, you need to get in here.
It's so funny. It's so funny when you think about the scope of a message that you can reach online, and how you wonder how people learned about things before. I've learned so many things from YouTube. Like anything that I don't know how to do, I learned from YouTube, I think.
Yeah. Books, clubs, social gatherings, libraries. When I started shipping fish and stuff, I had dial-up internet. And back then I was working a lot with mystery snails. And back then as well, you had to have permits for every single state that you were shipping to, and you had to create a new permit every time. So with my dial-up internet, I used to have to log in to the USDA site, get my permit, print my permit, and put my permit in my box for every single sale.
Wow. What a pain. No, those are Joey's questions.
Oh, I thought you meant me.
Where are your questions? Okay, here's your questions.
Like, I wouldn't doubt that Joey has questions for me. But,
He does.
It's going to be more relevant.
Talking to him was, it was like herding cats. And we would go down, and then at some point in the interview, he's like, "I've got questions for you, Sean." I was like, "Okay," and he would ask me questions, and I'd start to answer, and then he'd move on to another question. It's like, did you really want me to answer these questions, or?
That's funny, because when I went out to his house, that was the biggest comment in the video he put out, was that he would ask me a question, I would start to answer, and he'd move on to the next question. It's so funny, because it's just Joey. It's not that he's not interested. He's just like thinking about the next thing.
He is, his mind, the way his mind works is so fascinating. So he's like, we wrapped up the night by him telling me that I needed to surprise Holly and take her to Cuba, and and remind her why we fell in love. I was like, what, over dysentery?
No, man, you should totally go to Cuba.
Really?
Really.
Okay, that's weird that you two are the only two people that have ever told me that.
Phenomenal food, phenomenal music, phenomenal weather, beautiful scenery. It's affordable. Go to Cuba. 100%. It's because only a couple years ago did they open up that we could travel there again. So it's not like an overdone thing, and it's totally safe. Like, go to Cuba.
Wow.
It's yeah.
I haven't really been anywhere. I really wanted to go to. Yeah.
Lived in Thailand for 7 years and has traveled for the past 20. And he said one of the most favorite places he's ever gone as a person who's into music, like you're pretty into music, is Cuba.
Wow. See, I'd really love to go to Thailand. I'd really like to go into Asia, and all the different.
That as well, but definitely bring your antibiotics and your pills.
Yeah. It was just funny the way you put it, take her to Cuba and remind her why you fell in love. I was like, you probably remind her here. Okay. So I started following you in part because we have very similar tastes in fish. Anytime I'm in a pet store, even now, I'll be in a pet store, I'll see a small fish I like, and I Google it, and you're usually one of the first couple of videos. And I sit there on my iPod Air and I'll sit there. I'll be watching your video in the middle of a fish store to determine if I was going to kill it right away or if I could possibly keep it.
That's so cool.
I still do that all the time. My wife's like, "Are you watching a video right now?" I was like, "I'm learning things. I don't want to read it."
That's so amazing. And that's really why I made those videos, is I wanted people to be able to be like, oh man, should I impulse buy? Is it really an impulse buy? If I've at least done a little bit of research, can I find out at least, if they can survive in my water? So that's pretty awesome.
If I do find something in text, I skip down to, do they have a pH that they have to live at? Which I've found later on, I've discovered that's got usually a little bit more of a range to it. And if they eat live food, if they have to eat live food, usually I can't keep them.
I think the dietary restrictions are, generally speaking, the most restrictive. For instance, if you have something that is an obligate predator that won't take dried foods, or if you have something that is an obligate grazer that won't take prepared foods, they need algae growth. I think diet and temperature are probably the most limiting factors when selecting fish.
Now, as long as it doesn't have to be colder, you can kind of augment with a heater or something, but the ones that have to be cold are kind of tricky. Like a lot of people keep oxalotls and stuff that want to be in a colder than usually room temperature even. So.
Right, and a lot of that is oxygen content as well, because the warmer the water, the less dissolved oxygen. So if you have a species that has a high oxygen requirement, you just can't achieve that if you live somewhere where your ambient temperature is too warm, without a chiller anyway. Not if you want them to have any longevity.
You mostly like small species, right? I mean, I know you have big species too. Like you got your pollies and your gar, and up to recently, your Oscar and stuff. Oh, I'm sorry, so sorry.
Rip Captain Grumpy.
Yeah, rip Captain Grumpy Pants, right? Yeah. Press F in the chat for Captain Grumpy Pants.
I think what really I find most interesting about the really tiny species is that in a more general sized aquarium, you can keep a lot more of them, and you can get a really great natural behavior that you really can't duplicate with I call them the mid-sized or the average fishes.
Sure.
Unless you're going to go to a really large aquarium, you can't keep big groups, but with little fish, you can keep big groups in an average-sized aquarium and just really have a stunning display. And I think it gives the opportunity for the fish to be happy, for the fish to look great because they feel happy, and just a lot of possibilities within the decor of the aquarium to make it a satisfying experience for all involved, I suppose.
Yeah, for me, I always felt inhumane to go too big if I didn't have the willingness to have an aquarium that was that big. And even with my 200-gallon, I'm still putting rainbows in it. In my Bichers, my big fish. I've got one. I don't. Yeah, Mr. Tubes. I've kind of wanting to put more in, but I don't see them at that size. And
therein lies the rub, because my big boys are big, and I have tried to get more pollies to grow out to add into that aquarium, because I think I could put maybe 2 more big boys in the bottom level. I wouldn't get more gar, I wouldn't get any mid-level, but pollies, you've seen them, they lay around or they eat.
Right.
It's a very sedentary fish, except for when they're not. But you can't buy them at the size that you need once you fall in love with them. So it's kind of a vicious cycle there.
Yeah, I mean, I could get a baby one, but then he'd have to get so big before I could add him in without getting eaten like spaghetti. Yep. That I'd need 2 big tanks. I got no more room. I got nowhere to put a big tank. The big problem here is half my house is a second story. Like all this stuff And this room is on a second story, so really, I don't feel safe putting much more than maybe a 55 in there. And even this room, it's like if I jumped up and down, all this stuff goes. I used to have nightmares when I had the dirted 55. I'd have nightmares about that thing just busting out and then, flooding my garage out and ripping up the floor and having to change everything. So, but I'll risk 25 gallons or so.
I mean, that's the beauty of nanofish too, because even if you're like apartment living or dorm living and you can have a 20 long or maybe even 30 or a 40 or a 55, you can do a lot with small fish in that size aquarium. And as a quintessential like fish geek who worries about like long-term husbandry, for me, the idea of keeping a lot of little fish in a big space is just super appealing.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. So you love polys. Does that make you polyamorous?
Polypescarous?
That's my joke I thought up earlier today. Oh, gosh. So, I wanted to ask you about your turtle, Stinky.
Ah, yes.
Isn't that what your daughter's named it? Stinky?
Stinky the Snail Slayer.
Stinky the Snail Slayer. So, they're also called Musk Turtles, right?
Yes.
And they don't... How much bigger than he is now will they get? They stay really small, right?
4 inches max.
Wow.
So it's like a turtle that if you're keeping a singleton, you can keep in a 20 long. Now, they are a species that really spend almost all of their time in the water, so you want it to be a mostly full aquarium, unlike a lot of other...
Like a slider or
spend a lot of time outside. I do have a basking area for him. I have 2 basking areas. So he has a couple inches where he can get out of the water, but I'd say probably 90% of the time those guys spend in the water. They come up, they breathe, and then they go back in the water. But yeah, it's little. It's probably the best aquatic turtle to be a pet because they only get a couple of inches. They're easy to feed. You can just feed them pellets. Their UVB requirements are pretty low. Now, depending on where you research that, you'll find different information, but the vast majority of the breeders that I reached out to said that they saw very little difference between running UVB bulbs or not. I have one on there because I can.
Yeah, why not?
Why not if I can? Their temperature requirements are pretty broad because they're a native to this area. They can take it pretty chilly or up to pretty warm. So if you can create any sort of subtropical type temperature range, they do really well. I mean, they're really great pet turtles, much better than painteds or red-eared sliders, especially because they stay little.
Red-eared sliders start off...
aquatic,
Yeah.
And they're adorable.
My friend had a red-eared slider, and he came back from Florida with it, and it was like the size of a quarter. And then it was, it's quite a large animal at the end.
Well, and they're prolific breeders, and then their babies need that space too. The stink pots are nice, or the musk turtles, if you will, are nice because they stay so tiny. This summer, I saw some when I was paddling, and I remember scooping one up with the paddle of my kayak oar, and it was a full-grown adult, and it was only this big.
Wow.
And I was just like, this is an incredible turtle, but I want to give it the space that looks like this environment. I want it to be, I could be keeping this in a 10 gallon and it wouldn't suffer, or I can give it a 30 or a 40 gallon and it can like cruise around and, do fun things.
Well, they're not particularly like a clean animal. Like they're not, they're messy eaters and they're
turtles.
I guess they're, for me, I had bearded dragons, and I liked my bearded dragons, but I hated the smell. So
I know Musk Turtles, Musk, but I have yet to smell it.
Okay, that was going to be my other question: is do you actually smell them? Like, do
No,
they
but
smell all the time, or is it?
the only time I handle him is when I had him in a temporary setup before I set up his permanent digs. And even then, he never musked.
So is that like something they do, like a skunk kind of?
Yeah, I think it's a defense mechanism. I don't think it's something that they just like, do for fun. I mean, but also, I don't pet my fish. I don't pet my turtle. So
Yeah, I
it's unlikely to have that response.
my cat I've warmed up to over the years, but yeah, I kind of like my pets like between a pane and glass. So,
Well, see, I'm a crazy cat lady. You know I have a Catio. So
yeah. Oh yeah, we want to build one of those so bad.
do it. Your cats will love you for it.
Did you build it yourself?
I did.
Was it difficult? Did you go by like? Did you find a YouTube video, or what did you? How did you
No,
do
but
it?
I made a YouTube video.
Oh, you got a video on it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to go find that one.
It's not a tutorial. It's terrible. But yeah, I made a video of building the Catio. I basically got like a burr up my butt one weekend that we needed to make a Catio. So we went and bought some lumber and built a Catio.
That's
And
funny.
now I have a Catio.
See,
It's 3 stories, 3 cat stories, only 1.5 human stories. And it's carpeted, and then it has scratching posts in the corners, and they love it.
That's great. That's great. You know, uh, I really understand how people fall in love with cats. They're they can be really nice. Like I didn't appreciate mine so much until I got stuck at home for long periods of time, and then Kerrigan left, and so now Holly will go to work. Kerrigan's not there, and the cat just is kind of in there staring at me until I pick him up. He jumps in my lap, and the tail goes all in my face and stuff. And he's huge. He's a Maine Coon,
Ooh.
and he's a big fat cat. Very happy. Recently, you started another channel that's all about plants.
I did.
So, were plants something that you always liked, or did that kind of come from Planted Tanks, or what happened there?
I have always been connected with growing things. Growing up, I grew up on a farm where we raised all our own food. There was tons of gardening. Even when I went to college and I lived in Center City, Philadelphia, I was growing vegetables and I had houseplants. That further manifested when I got interested in aquariums, and I started growing all these aquarium plants. And then I got interested in growing emergent growth, high humidity plants, my summer tubbing. And, I've always had house plants. And I was just like, one of the things that I saw in my comments are a lot like, we're here for the fish, not the plants. So for me, like between my carnivorous plants, my house plants, my bog plants, and like all that kind of stuff, I was like, I'll just create a second channel, and I largely ignore it. I just put content on there when I feel like it's relevant. It's not monetized. It's just a spot to put content without alienating the fish people. And of course, there are a great many fish people that were super supportive of my plant content, but there was also the vast majority that were like, girl, we're here for the fish. Like the fish. I don't care about your soil mix for succulents. Like, whatever. So I just launched that second channel. Actually, it was before COVID when I used to go to the plant store every week and get new stuff. I haven't put out a whole lot on there other than like seasonal stuff in my bog garden because I quite honestly haven't gotten any new plants. But I did convert one wall of my house. I have 14-foot ceilings. That is all. It's like a wall of plants. I have a biorb. I have a paludarium. I have plants everywhere in my house. Orchid. I have an orchid section right there. It's something that's really important to me and gives me great joy. And I just thought creating the second channel would be a way to share that learning curve without alienating my fish people.
It's funny, things that you're obsessed with, and especially if you're successful on your YouTube channel, it's really tempting to try other things and see if those will be as popular. But then you quickly, you quickly find out that you're a magazine about a very specific topic, and the further you venture away from that, the more confused and upset random people become.
I mean, I would love to do like camping and hiking and kayaking, canoeing, and like reviews of equipment and stuff, because I mean, I've been doing this stuff my whole life, but it's only been in the past year that I've really gotten like hard into it, where I go for like weeks at a time, living pretty minimalist in the wild. I would love to do that, but I can't imagine putting that on my fish channel. Like, would it even get any views? And why do people want to see me with no makeup looking like crazy? So, whatever.
I started a board game channel for very similar reasons. Like I'm obsessed with board games. I like board games every bit as much as I like aquariums, and but it's newer. It's a newer thing that I like versus I've liked this for a long time,
Right.
and so my mind's on it a lot. So, and after like this is my year 12 on YouTube, I'm used to making a video about anything I buy and anything, this has all usually been aquarium stuff, but I'm used to everything's filtered through, should I make a video about it?
Right. I know exactly what you mean.
Everything's like, oh, I need to tell thousands of people about this. But now it's funny when you start a new channel, especially, if you're up over 10 or 20,000 people on your regular channel and you start a new one and it's like you're at 2 people. Or, there's me and then there's Kerrigan, with the first 2 subscribers to my channel, and then the trickle in but it's funny, I'll post a board game video and I'll be like, 2 hours later, I'm like, oh, I'm up to 16 views.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty lucky in that there's so much crossover between aquarium and plants that
Yes.
I honestly don't even know how many subscribers that channel has. Maybe like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. I'm not sure, but I don't have the watch time for it to be monetized. But just the fact that many people were interested in to see my plant nerdery was very gratifying, and I am very thankful, and I should do a much better job of putting out content. But COVID, man,
Yeah.
it slowed my roll.
Yeah. Well, I got furloughed, and so I tried to increase my role.
Right.
Because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm suddenly a full-time YouTuber.
Right. Well, I mean, I've been doing that, but I don't know. I guess I just needed the time to regroup mentally, especially with what went on in my personal life with my marriage dissolving and all of that.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to put out a video every week that I'm proud of and not push myself further than that.
I've actually considered scaling back myself, not scaling back my tank so much, but maybe scaling back the content and waiting till I've got, maybe what I'm doing here is this is an experiment to see if I can make content that's not what I would typically do. And my big inspiration are people like Joe Rogan and and other people that successfully do successful podcasts, and I want to do long format conversations with other fish keepers and people that present themselves on YouTube as fish keepers, personalities.
I think that's awesome. And I think there's a
goes.
lot of opportunity as well for you to do content with people that are just experienced keepers. And if I can ever be of help with connecting you with folks to have conversations with, please let me know, because that's kind of been my MO from the start of my hobby, is facilitating relationships. That's why I wrote for Amazonas. I was on tons of podcasts. That's why I started YouTube. I just want everyone to know everybody and learn everything and share whatever they can. So however I can be of help to you, please let me know.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm starting with my closest friends, which is definitely you. You and I have talked behind the scenes, and you've let me cry on your shoulder, and I've done the same, and it's meeting you has really meant a lot to me, both as a fish keeper and just a person that has needed a friend and a colleague in this crazy internet world.
Well, the feeling is quite mutual, and the way that we've included our families too has been very special to me.
Yeah.
I feel very privileged that we've met each other's families, and I look forward to facilitating that in the future.
Well, I think once this gets going, maybe I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to post it whether it does well or not, which is kind of my MO. But it's like, I'm just going to do it, and who cares if people like it? If 4 people get something out of it, then I help 4 people, right?
Man, I think it's cool. And, I think there's a lot of opportunity to capitalize on this long format. I think a lot of people right now they have a lot of viewing fatigue, but they don't have listening fatigue. So I think that this is a really smart thing for you to do, especially if you can get interesting people on that have something to say, where people can have it playing while they're cleaning their house or hanging out on their deck or whatever. And when they're I cannot sit in front of my computer for another minute, but I can listen to my computer all day long. I think it's really smart.
I'm going to, what the plan is right now is I've got Joey, I've got you, I've got George Farmer said he'd talk to me next week. And then I've got kind of a loose list of other people that I like. And I'm gonna just kind of go down the list and talk to as many people as I can, and then I would like to release it as a podcast. It'll be on YouTube, but also I'm gonna pay for a podcast service they'll put it to iTunes and Spotify and everything else. And I want to call it the Water Change Companion.
Oh, see, that's perfect. Something to listen to while people are doing their maintenance.
Yeah, because that's when I listen. That's the only time now that I don't drive anywhere to work, that's the only time I listen to podcasts is while I was doing my water changes. So it's
I do it when I'm cooking.
Oh, yeah.
Cooking or driving.
I only eat at restaurants. I'm a terrible cook.
I'm a wonderful cook.
Really?
Yeah, I've actually thought about doing cooking channels.
There's another show.
I know, right? I should have 4 channels. 4. Cooking, fish keeping, adventuring, plants. Oh, wait, let's do makeup too. Fuck it. I'm going to have every corner of the internet. Maybe I should start a gossip channel.
You could do a video that's your crossover with all your channels. We're going to cook vegetables and fish in the woods.
Putting makeup on fish while I cook them in the woods.
Cooking in the woods makeover with vegetables and fish. These are houseplants that you can eat.
3 ingredient fish meal.
And some tilapia from I grew in my summer tub.
Oh man.
So you've been doing YouTube videos for 5 years.
It's true.
And how surprised have you been that you cannot predict what's going to be your super popular video of the year?
Well, I can honestly say that I never expect any of my videos to do well because education historically by YouTube is just shat upon.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm really surprised when I see, when I look at my analytics and I see what's doing well, and I'm like, okay, I made this video 5 years ago. The sound quality is terrible, and apparently it's what's being suggested now. So I think rarely does it have to do with the content, and often it has to comes down to like how it's being recommended. as to how people digest things, but I never know what's going to do well. The things that I find the most interesting and the most like get my geek singing, they never do well.
Yeah.
Like never.
I found that too. Like I'll try to anticipate, oh, I'll do this and it'll do well. And it doesn't. And then I'll make another video where I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do this week? Basic aquarium plants. And then it goes huge. Like
Yeah.
I could pretty much guarantee if Fluval sends me a new product and I talk about it, then it'll do pretty well. But like we went to the aquatic experience a few years ago, like I guess it was the Jersey one.
Yeah.
And that's where they had the Mega Flex, right? They introduced the Mega Flex, the big tube.
Mega.
Mega. And so I did a video about it, you know, of course, talking to Chris from Fluval. I want to call it Fluval. Should I call it Fluval? That's what they call it. Maybe I should call it what they call it. I don't know. But I did this.
However you like it.
Yeah, I did a video about it. It did better than any other video that came out of that convention. Like I was like, that's the #1 video, is me talking about one aquarium, you know, basically one aquarium. So I bought one.
Yeah.
And even me setting up mine didn't do as well as the one where I just talked about it. So it's like, I don't know. I think the algorithm is really picking what.
I have no idea.
What the
and
winners
my life
are.
Had so many ups and downs where I've had to like dip out here and there that, you know, I just put out content because it's important for me to put out content in case people want to find it. And I can't get caught up in the numbers, because if I got caught up in the numbers, I would have quit probably 4 years ago. So I just try and remember why I create content. I love being a woman of visibility. I love inspiring people to think more about the science. I like people to think more about the environment and conservation. And I just really want everyone to have success and provide as much information as I can for them to do so.
Well, I'm so glad you got drug in, because it's super important that at least a percentage of the people that are presenting content on YouTube are very well educated to the degree you are, and have the relative experience to give good advice. You know, I often like, if I don't know, I'll go, I read this.
Well, I do the same thing. I'm like, I don't know this one.
I read this. I try to find it from like 3 places that are at least similar enough. You know, I try to, and even then, like, sometimes there's things you just believe that maybe they're true and maybe they aren't.
They've been said for so long and you've read them everywhere, but it doesn't always mean that they're true. And the biggest takeaway from this hobby is that no matter what you've read, like, your mileage will vary.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, I think you could pick any trope of fish keeping and find regurgitated nonsense that people have read for years that has nothing to do with science or practicality. And I mean, that's what makes it so difficult trying to help people in this hobby, is how do they know who to listen to?
Yeah.
How do they know what's accurate? How do you figure it out other than, you know, in my mind, looking to science and applying some critical thinking?
Yeah, you don't. Hopefully it doesn't cost an animal its life. You know,
Right.
you never want to get to that point if you can help it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think we've gone for probably an hour or so between the 2 recordings. Doesn't seem like an hour, though, does it?
No, it doesn't. I can't wait to see your face again.
Yeah.
You're one of my favorite humans.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Let's
say hi to Sean.
Yeah.
We'll go get ice cream. I've been waiting for you guys to
Oh.
be done.
She's trying to go get ice cream, but she's been waiting till we're done to go out the front door.
Well, I can pause. It's not a live stream.
Like, she was like flashing her phone at me, but I don't have my glasses on, so I can't see the screen. I had no idea she was showing me pictures of ice cream.
Oh, yum. Rachel's.
Do you know I struggle with my last name?
You notice I've not said your last name even once, right? O'Leary.
You know what's funny is that when I got married and I became an O'Leary, I was so stoked because I was like, man, everyone's going to be able to spell it. Everyone's going to be able to say it. It's going to be the best thing ever. Not the case.
I feel like I've got a mouthful of marbles every time I try to say it for some reason. I can't take. I've probably got 30 minutes of outtakes of just me going, O'Leary.
Maybe it's your Tennessee.
I think it is. It's my suppressed Tennessee because I spent so much of my life like trying to resist the country accent that's been baked into my heritage here. Anyway, Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great getting to know you a little bit better and sharing your knowledge with more people. If you don't know where to find Rachel, there'll be a link in the description of this video where you can go find her channel, and I'm going to include the plant channel too, in case you're into houseplants also. She could use some more followers there. You can also catch her on Instagram. What's your Instagram handle? Like we're friends on there, but
Ms. Jenks or Rachel O'Leary. I think generally speaking, if you look up my name, it's pretty easy to find me. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you including me. You're one of my favorite creators and favorite human beings. So thank you so much, Sean.
the feeling's definitely mutual. The feeling's definitely mutual. You're an inspiration to me, and I can't imagine doing this and not including you. Hey, thanks so much for joining me today. Next week, we're going to talk to George Farmer, one of my favorite aquascapers. It's all coming up soon. See you then.